Welcome back, Music Maniacs, to another episode of Gibbs Drops the Needle, your one-stop spot for all things music. Got some news for you today, starting with a little bit of a follow-up from the last time we did news. If you remember, there were some stories about AI and celebrities suing because their voices were being used in AI. And I believe I said that the industry was really starting to crack down on some AI usage, and Deezer, I believe, was one that they were starting to label songs if they were AI generated. So it looks like another music distribution platform is going to follow suit and even take it up a notch farther from that, with not paying royalties out. So this article comes from Synthtopia, and it says that Tidal will label AI generated music and block it from earning royalties. Tidal is a streaming service for music, much like Spotify or Apple Music, and they have announced a new AI policy saying that they will label AI generated tracks for transparency and that they will not pay royalties on these tracks. Beginning July 15th, listeners will see an AI label on tracks that Tidal determines are entirely AI generated. The company says it plans to expand those labels to substantially AI generated music as detection technology improves. The policy defines AI-generated music as music that is wholly or substantially created using generative AI, while acknowledging that AI-assisted tools have become a common part of music production. Tidal says that artists should be free to use AI creativity, but argues that listeners should also be able to identify AI-generated content and that royalty payments should prioritize works directly produced, written, and performed by people. Under the new rules, Tidal also says it will remove or block AI-generated music associated with fraudulent activity, including content that impersonates artists, exploits a person's name or likeness, attempts to deceive listeners, or is linked to suspicious upload or streaming behavior. So that's a lot like what we went through with the Backstreet Boys lawsuit, and there were some others suing over their name, image, likeness, basically wanting to copyright their voice. And it seems as if Tidal is taking a step in that direction to support that initiative and take a stand against these AI generated platforms that may sound too similar to certain artists and that are meant to fool a listener into thinking that it is a different artist. This article goes on to say the company will also require distributors to identify AI-generated music before it reaches the platform, and the same standards will apply to releases distributed through Tidal Upload. Artists who believe their music has been incorrectly identified as AI-generated can request a review through Tidal support. So that's good that if it flag something as being generated by AI and it's not, it seems like there is an appeal process to that to get it correctly labeled instead. But I would think that this article and this stand by Tidal is a real positive step for artists in general, just because the big doomsday thought of music is that if you can sit down and tell a computer to write a song about something and it spits out a song, that you no longer need the artist in a lot of these cases. And I think that, as I said, is the doomsday thought, is that eventually you're going to phase out to where you don't have artists writing and creating, and the record companies would basically cut out the need of paying an artist by just generating their own popular songs and making money off of that. So the fact that you have a music platform like Tidal stepping up and saying you can AI generate a song, that's fine, but we're going to label it, and then you are also not going to be paid royalties on those, is a very big stand and a positive step to keep making sure that artists are properly compensated for their work and properly valued in the music industry instead of just relying on computers. Now, as Tidal states, I absolutely agree that AI can be a very creative tool to use. So, musicians that might dabble a little bit in AI use is probably fine as long as the main songwriting and production of the song is done by a person. So I really like that they are supporting artists and supporting keeping actual people into making music. And I hope to see more of these music platforms start taking the same stand and not only label the AI generated music, but say you're not going to pay royalties to it and support these artists instead in creating actual music and not letting just a computer run the industry. So hopefully in the future we see, as I said, more music platforms doing what Tidal is doing, but just a lot of respect for Tidal too, going ahead and taking that stand here. Next story comes from a X post by Consequence. I don't know if you're still allowed to call it a tweet. I feel like X post isn't as catchy to say, but since it's not Twitter, do we still say tweet or do we say X post? I don't know. Like I said, it just doesn't sound right, but a post on X by Consequence said that Bad Bunny's Superbowl Halftime show received 10 Emmy nominations in 2026. The Emmy nominations were just announced not too long ago, and Bad Bunny, like I said, has received 10 nominations for the halftime show, and he is nominated for the categories of Outstanding Variety Special, Outstanding Music Direction, Outstanding Directing for a Variety Special, Outstanding Production Design for a Variety Special, Outstanding Lighting Design / Lighting Direction for a Special, Outstanding Sound Mixing for a Variety Series or Special, Outstanding Technical Direction and Camera Work for a Special, Outstanding Choreography for Variety or Reality Programming, Outstanding Makeup for a Variety, Nonfiction, or Reality Program, Outstanding Hairstyling for a Variety, Nonfiction, or Reality Program. So 10 nominations there for the 2026 Grammys. I would be interested. I didn't see the article or anything that said what she was nominated for, but I did see that Taylor Swift's Eras Tour was nominated for some Emmys, so it'd be interesting to see if they're all the same categories. I don't know if they count for all the same categories, so maybe Bad Bunny will be going up against Taylor Swift, but as I said, I just didn't read into everything that Taylor Swift was nominated for. Next story features Elton John, who announced final surprise farewell Yellow Brick Road shows in Mexico. This article comes from NME. Elton John has announced 2 surprise shows in Mexico City, which will finally conclude his Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour 3 years after it originally ended. The tour was originally scheduled to conclude in 2021, but the COVID-19 pandemic, alongside a hip injury which forced him to postpone his remaining European and UK dates in September of 2021, led to the tour's extension into 2023. Among the shows canceled were a number in Mexico. Now, Elton John has announced 2 shows at Mexico City's Estadio Banorte on October 2nd and October 3rd. Tickets will go on sale to the general public on July 16th. The pre-sale will be held the day before on July 15th, so couple more chances to see Elton John before he is officially retiring from touring. The last story comes from Rolling Stone, and we talked earlier about Tidal not wanting to pay out music royalties for AI-generated music, and it turns out that Jermaine Dupri is suing for $18 million in royalties, and he was actually involved. This is not an AI-generated case. This is him basically accusing Sony Music of a contract breach. So let's get into this article. The Grammy-winning producer is claiming Sony Music, quote, engaged in willful, deceitful actions, end quote, to withhold royalties. Grammy-winning producer Jermaine Dupri has filed a blistering lawsuit against Sony Music Entertainment, SME, accusing the company of underpaying and concealing royalties tied to his work with artists including Mariah Carey, Usher, Criss Cross, Escape, Bow Wow, and Da Brat. The Atlanta-based producer and songwriter, known for shaping the sound of 90s hip-hop and R&B, claims Sony Music, quote, knew that it was violating, end quote, contracts with him and his influential label, So Def, but, quote, never attempted to disclose its contemptuous accounting practices, end quote. Dupri's lawsuit, filed in Manhattan federal court, is seeking at least $18 million in damages. Quote, the systematic pattern of underreporting royalties, failure of reporting royalties, and altering and or updating statements to report previously earned royalties. Sony Music Entertainment has engaged in willful, deceitful actions designed to harm plaintiffs in their business, end quote. The new 13-page lawsuit obtained by Rolling Stone reads, in the case of Criss Cross, Dupri claims Sony hid royalties owed on Criss Cross's catalog for more than 2 decades. According to the complaint, Sony kept those funds in a separate royalty accounting system unknown to plaintiffs. Dupri alleges Sony also knowingly concealed additional money owed from Jagged Edge's 1997 album The Jagged Era, and altered royalty payments dating back several years. He and his lawyer, Chris Brown, probably not the same musician Chris Brown, list at least 7 contracts between the producer and Sony Music entities covering more than 25 years. They claim an accounting audit conducted last year uncovered millions owed to Dupri and his companies So Def Recordings and So Def Productions. Reps for Sony Music did not immediately return Rolling Stone's request for a comment. Dupri's lawyer said he had no comment when reached by email. In the lawsuit, Dupri is described as a mastermind of the Southern hip-hop and R&B sound. It notes Dupri was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2018, and that he won the Grammy Award for Best R&B Song in 2006 for the track We Belong Together, which he co-wrote with Mariah Carey and Jonta Austin. The lawsuit links to the song's Spotify stream count, which listed more than 942 million streams as of this article. Quote, Dupri is a musical icon whose recording on So Def and production with other artists have produced over $200 million in gross revenue in the music industry, end quote. That was a statement from the lawyer. While the complaint is asking for at least $18 million in damages, Dupri is not stopping there. Quote, given that the matter of unreported producer royalties is not an isolated issue evident by the above, it is likely that SME did not report producer royalties to plaintiffs for producer services rendered in connection with other artists associated with the So Def/SME deals. Additional royalties due to plaintiffs have not yet been determined, end quote. I feel like if this is true and they haven't been holding up their part of their contract and paying in royalties, then Dupri is obviously owed that money. And I think you would have to argue that maybe it's more than $18 million. But that all depends on how many ways this pie is being split. How many people get a cut of that song, because 290 some million streams sounds like a lot of streams. And we went through in an earlier episode basically what that pays out per million streams or so is, I think it was around $1,000 for a million streams. So you're talking a good chunk of money there, but also you're splitting it between songwriters, artists, music labels, everything like that. So 18 million might be a fine number for him. Obviously, I would not complain over $18 million. But maybe he's owed more. I don't know. I guess we'll see when the lawsuit is settled, and we will see if this actually ends up going to court or whether Sony Music just decides to settle with him outside of court. That's all the news I have for you today. Hit that like button, subscribe, follow, whatever you gotta do to help me out. I really appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Gibbs. This is Gibbs Drops the Needle. Stay safe and be kind.